I also offer my thanks to all of you for joining us today to talk about Oregon's future. Before I dive into my thoughts about how investing will be involved in solving the PERS underfunding, I'd like to acknowledge a couple of things. First, inevitably, we'll revisit tensions from prior efforts to solve the PERS underfunding problem. There are people who will say that the solutions we propose will be unfair, and they're right. They will be unfair, because by definition, solving a legacy cost problem is unfair. Second, to solve the pension funding shortfall, we'll all need to see this challenge with new eyes and fresh perspectives. For me, that fresh perspective came in a joint and routine meeting of the OIC and the PERS board. In that meeting, we were discussing the funding shortfall. And although the role of OIC is primarily analytical, more generally, we serve the public. And in that meeting, I realized that if we allowed the $22 billion liability to be considered merely in numeric terms, we would not be meeting the call of public service. After all, the point of pensions is not to talk about budgets and liability forecasts and investment strategies and rate collars. The whole point of it is to take care of each other. But in taking care of each other, we have to reconcile two imperatives. The first is that we must meet the commitments made to PERS participants, period. The second is that we have to use our tax dollars to make long-term investments for the future in order to ensure that we continue to have a prosperous society for everyone. The challenge is, how do we balance these two imperatives? Any solution from where I sit as an investor will be based on the pension funding model. And thankfully, it's very simple. Benefits equal contributions plus earnings. When most people hear this equation, their first thought is, can we just earn our way out of the $22 billion hole? Unfortunately, we cannot earn our way out, and this is why. The PERS fund is already a top performer. At 5 years, we're ranked number 3 in our peer group. At 7 years, we jumped to the number 1 spot. At the 10-year mark, we keep the number 1 spot. In fact, we've been so consistent at performing well that the calculation of the $22 billion liability assumes that we'll continue at that level of performance into perpetuity. You see, we're already squeezing out as much risk-adjusted return as we can. The only way to get higher returns is to take more risk, and we cannot responsibly take more risk. The bottom line is, this is the bottom line, we already have the $22 billion liability in the pension plan. We have to face it. Otherwise, as Carmen mentioned, we won't be making investments in school and transportation and infrastructure, and we will have allowed a numeric deficit to become a moral deficit. So that brings us back to the simple pension funding equation. Benefits equal contributions and earnings. Patrick, I understand that we're turning to Tim to look at contributions and benefits.
Thank you, RUKAIYAH.